Hi, welcome to Splash Page. I'm Andrew, and I'm here by myself today to do the finale of season 2 of Invincible. Sean couldn't make it tonight, so it's just me. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. I'm going to give it a shot. Sean was very busy with his family, and I gave him an ultimatum. I said, listen, it's either me or your family, and he chose his family. And on top of that, I threatened him. I said, if you're not here for this taping, I'm going to do 15 minutes on that one scene about my favorite character, the mummy. And he said, listen, family. So here goes the season finale of season 2 review, all about the mummy Kahor. No, I mean seriously, I will talk about the mummy, of course, but we'll also get into other stuff from the episode. But come on, I love that mummy. They finally came back to it. We thought it was a silly throwaway scene, and really, I think the important thing in this whole series, everything else is just kind of filler. I need to know more about this mummy. Great scene, great funny gag. He comes out, he's scaring everyone, and just kind of stops and goes, "But you're women. I need a man to take over to get out of here." And they call him sexist and shame him, and he's still trapped there. I don't know why he couldn't leave with one of their fathers. The two characters' names I saw were Ella Purnell and Chloe Bennett. And one of them had the scarab tattoo. One of them had the super strength she got from her grandmother. They discussed where she got that strength from, and the fact that it used to be very sexist back in the day with superheroes. You also get that in the Watchmen when they go back to the old Watchmen comics back in the 50s, and they have to wear those skimpy bathing suits to go fight crime because, it's the 50s. So I do this book and this show pokes fun at a lot of the superhero tropes, which happens a lot. But I think that's honestly all I have on the Mummy Kahor. And here's to hoping we get a little bit more of his history and backstory next season, assuming we get the next season sometime in the next 3 years. But let's rewind really quick back to the beginning of the episode, because we'll get into the meat of the episode a little later. But I want to talk about the very beginning when we see Nolan, Omni Man, fighting a bunch of robots and ape men in a X-Men kind of practice room. And this is a very cool tradition that they introduced for the Viltrumites. If you're found guilty of treason, you are to be executed, but not until you're strong enough to be executed. You have to be in good physical shape because they find it shameful to execute someone that can't defend themselves, which I think is a very cool little piece of Viltrumite lore, how strong and proud they are, that they won't even execute a traitor unless they're of sound body, sound mind. Well, if they're of sound mind, they wouldn't be a traitor, according to Viltrumite laws. But if they're not of sound body, they can't execute them. They have to take care of them until they gain their strength back. So that was kind of cool. We see Nolan starts to fight his captors, but not to escape, just to have the pride, his own self worth, to stand up and walk out to his cell on his own. He's given up. He's understands. He's not a Viltrumite anymore. He says it himself when later in the episode, after Alan got caught, Alan the alien got himself caught to talk to try to escape with Nolan. He says to Alan, "Listen, I'm no longer a Viltrumite. I have empathy. I care for these people." He still hates himself for caring for those people, but he does have the empathy there. That's an interesting mental game he's playing with himself, which a lot of these characters are. We really go deep into the thought process of all these people. It really makes them feel real, this world. And like the mummy scene, it's amazing how Kirkman was able to balance and keep up in the air so many different stories in both the comic book and in the show. Because you don't get an episode that tells a story and ends a story. You don't have the story about Omnipotence, the story about Angstrom Levy. We'll get there. Or the story about Nolan in prison. It's all up in the air. It's all constantly moving back and forth and coming back to haunt us. Little callbacks like the mummy scene again. Uh, so yeah, that's very cool about how this show works. And yeah, so Krieg is keeping Nolan there and making sure he's of sound body to be executed. Just when Alan gets himself captured, so that he can talk to Nolan in his brain and say, "Listen, we should get out of here. We should fight these people." And that's when Nolan kind of has his breakdown. He's like, I don't want to go. I don't deserve to leave. I'm no longer a Viltrumite. I hate that I care for people. But then he has an epiphany. And it is the final line. We're jumping way ahead. The final line of the post credit scene, which realizes as Alan is talking to him, he still has something to live for. He thinks he might miss his wife, which is really sweet because there was all the talk. Debbie never knew once everything went down in Chicago if no one even still loved her or ever loved her. But apparently, he had that in him at some point. Whether he had it in the beginning or not, who knows? But he grew to have it at some point. I'm going to hit a couple of the smaller storylines before we really get into the meat of this. We have a scene, another relationship with Rudy and Amanda at Guardians HQ, where Rudy kind of Amanda, Monster Girl, basically teaches him how to have a conversation. Which Amanda's giving him another chance to learn how to be a human, how to have a conversation. She's being patient with him. So they're going to work on fixing her aging curse, and they're going to work on going out on another date and see where that leads. So that's, I mean, she looks like she's 15, but she's like late 20s, early 30s. And he looks like he's 12 or 15, but I don't know how old he is. But they have the craziest relationship. I wish they would go deeper into that. I wish there was a whole sideshow, more comedy based, of two adults trapped in children's bodies trying to have an awkward teenage relationship, because that would be incredible. Down in the comments, let me know if you think that's a good idea. And more importantly, pitch titles for this show. We're gonna write this together. We're gonna try to write this as a community if you guys are cool with that. But let's move on from there. We have the scene at the end. Immortal's been having a tough time of things since he lost Kate, and he comes back to his kind of place out in the woods, in the snowy woods. And guess who's there? Kate is back. She's alive. She tells him she's been living through a duplicate most of her life because she was frightened and she never told anyone. And she was afraid that Immortal would be upset with her, but no, he's just everything is okay now. Kate is still alive. And now we finally get to the crux of this entire episode, Angstrom Levy, which is such an interesting storyline in the books, and also such a twisted mind, and not of his own fault, but definitely of his own doing. We end of last episode, the cliffhanger. Angstrom called Mark from Debbie's phone and said, "When are you coming home?" And this episode, Mark shows up at home. We see the neighbor Taylor jogging down the street. He's having a tough time of it. Taylor gets the Invincible cue card today, this week. Congrats, Taylor, the one-off who shouldn't have had a name, but he speaks to himself in the third person and can't jog very well. But Mark makes it inside the house, and he sees Angstrom there threatening to snap Debbie's neck. And this is straight out of the books. They did it much more in detail here, and I really liked what they did a little bit later with Angstrom here. But basically, the outline of this is straight from the story, from the comics. Mark attacks, just flies right at him out of pure anger, and Angstrom opens up a portal, sends him to a field somewhere where there are talking dinosaurs in this universe. Dinosaurs became the dominant species. And one of the dinosaurs, voiced by Zachary Quinto, or Robot. So Robot, in a different universe, is a dinosaur that speaks. But Angstrom opens the portal and he's there holding Oliver Sweetly, which is always creepy when you have a villain cradling a child that is not theirs and they might hurt them. He tosses Oliver, and Debbie makes an incredible dad catch, just jumps and dives into the couch to save the child, and sends Mark off to another universe. Lots of different alternate universes in this episode. Sends him off into a universe that is similar to, but legally distinct from, Marvel's Spider-Man, where a Spider-Man like character was fighting Prof Ock, or Professor Ock, and the whole Mark not knowing who was the villain there. He's like, I don't know, you have red eyes and he's an old man. Did the same thing with the Batman scene where they couldn't say Batman's name, but you saw the cape in the corner of the screen there. And he says, so you dress like a bat and your name is, yeah, that's pretty lazy. So again, Kirkman's taking shots at all the other comic properties and the superhero stories. There was a lot of that. I believe I remember reading that when he started writing Invincible, he'd been turned down from a lot of superhero books from being able to write on them. So he just wrote his own, or he was just frustrated with the industry and just said, fine, I'm going to write my own book and screw the industry. I'm going to take shots at all of the different tropes here and everything these people have been doing. And for the most part, he did it pretty well. I mean, there are some aspects of that book that haven't aged very well, but most of it pretty solid, and they kept the good stuff for the show, as you can see. Yeah, so Mark is sent back and forth to a whole bunch of other dimensions. And you could see Angstrom is smart because at a certain point, Mark says, I'm not going to keep flying through you dumb portals. And Angstrom flings a knife at Debbie and Oliver so that Mark has to go fly after it, at which point he puts a portal right in front of him and sends him off somewhere else. And the one moment when Debbie was able to slash him and try to run away, he put the portal right in front of the door so Mark would fly back in and knock her back. You can see he's very, very intelligent and tactical too. We see him in the Walking Dead world, which is another Kirkman property, another Kirkman comic book, and another Kirkman television show. We see him sitting in the woods at a campfire with the Walking Dead characters, just talking to some people at a campfire, explaining this whole crazy story, and they're staring at him, just kind of blank stares, deadpan, going, "Are you crazy?" Or they just ran out of animation time, which was the gag from last episode. Sometimes we just do a solid screen so that we can do animation easier, and then they overplayed it the very next fight. But then he's sent to a world where there's cavemen, and then he's sent to fight. I think that's Omnipotus, who's just in a weird bubble that fighting people. The Batman scene, the Spider-Man scene, the Mad Max world where he had to kill people from Mad Max and said I didn't want it to come to this, and he was kind of upset about that. The moment that I mentioned before that I really liked how they added to the show is when Mark tells him, "No, you tried to save me. You were a good person doing a good thing." And then Angstrom sends him off on this whole crazy adventure and has this breakdown where he remembers sitting in his machine and tearing his own helmet off to go save Mark. But then he also remembers that scene we saw earlier in the season where Mark and Nolan from an alternate universe came in and gleefully murdered everyone in the room. And then we see another memory of Angstrom's where Mark finds him and his son in a little rundown hovel and murders his child, his little kid. And then we see a different Mark murdering people in the streets by tearing up the whole street and just everyone's torn to pieces. And we see another Mark just killing cops that are shooting at him. And Angstrom in that world is one of the cops. And we see a different Angstrom standing on top of a burnt building, watching Mark and Nolan fly by. A different Mark chopping the heads off of prisoners with his bare hands. And it really, like, I didn't quite get this when I was reading through the book, but you really get it here. When he put all of those other Angstrom's memories in his head, he no longer remembers what are his real memories and what are their memories. And he also has the memory of tearing the helmet off, but he also has his own memory of Mark murdering everyone in that room. But then he also has the memories of 1,000 other Angstroms seeing their friends and families murdered by Mark and Nolan, by Invincible and Omni Man. And he's really going through a breakdown, a mental breakdown. Every one of these characters is having a real tough time. If this show tells us anything, it's not easy to have superpowers. I mean, I would still take them if given the opportunity, but yeah, no, it is not easy to have superpowers, especially in this world. And eventually, there was a scene earlier. I think it was Eve told Mark or maybe it was Amber told Mark, sometimes you can't punch things. There are some things you just can't punch. I think that was when he was going to the dean, the professor at college. Uh, Debbie really proved that point because she got under Angstrom's skin a lot better than I think Debbie hurt Angstrom a lot more in this scene than Mark ever did, and physically too. She did slash him. I raised the Mark who defied his father and saved this planet. Such a strong line from Debbie, and I love that. But we basically come to a head when finally Angstrom and Mark go through the portal together, and they're just fighting, and they end up in this sand world, and there's no one there to protect or to worry about hurting, and Mark just goes off the edge. He flips and he punches Angstrom to death, just dripping in blood. I don't think he meant to do it, but obviously he meant to do it. And go back and watch it. He said he had that whole monologue to himself where he's like, "I thought you were stronger. I didn't want to kill you, but I did want to kill you." Again, this guy is someone that took something the wrong way and tried to murder him and his whole family. So he went a little nuts, and if you could call that a little nuts. And he murdered Angstrom and was trapped in this sandy, empty end of the world, Mad Max kind of world. Worse than Mad Max. There weren't even crazy people riding around on 4x4, whatever you call those trucks, Mad Max people. I'm gonna give out a secret. I've never watched a Mad Max. I hear they're angry. No, I don't know what happens in Mad Max. They have mohawks. They have sand trucks, like trucks that drive on the sand, and they shoot each other for oil. Is it like Waterworld in the desert? That's what I think Mad Max is. Angry people, and it's like Waterworld in the desert. Let me know if that's right. Because if it is, maybe I'll watch one of them. And if it isn't, maybe I'll watch one of them. So yeah, Mark is trapped in this Mad Max world that's just empty desert planet, basically, just Earth if everything died out. And he actually, in his breakdown, he starts laughing to himself, realizing that Angstrom kind of won. He's going to die here. And then suddenly, the Guardians of the Globe, well, the new Guardians, show up. But they're not the Guardians he remembers. They're 20 years older. And it's a really old Eve robot who turns out to be Rex in the robot suit, a monster girl, bulletproof, a woman with boxing gloves that I remember from the comic. I don't remember her name. I didn't look it up. And then the Brooklyn hipster casually carrying a Thor's hammer. And they basically say this all happened in our timeline 20 years ago. We had some time machines laying around. We figured out how to save you. So we're saving you from a different timeline to send you back to your timeline because things don't turn out great when you're not around. And Rex, or in the robot suit, even tells him that you would have survived this. You just wouldn't like who you became. So we're saving you and sending you back. So they send him back home. But before they send him home, 20 years older, Eve runs up and pleads with Mark and says, "Listen, I've always loved you. Just tell the younger me that you love her or that you don't. Tell her something." She makes it his problem. This is your problem, but she makes it his problem. Tell her something so she can move on with her life. It's kind of selfish, but I also get it. It's very regretful. Like, who wouldn't want to be able to do that in their older age, to go back to younger times and kind of tell yourself? But she didn't even tell herself. She told the guy she had a crush on, that she was in love with. So he goes back with this knowledge, and he visits his mother in the GDA hospital, and she's got a very futuristic sling, and they've got matching black eyes, and they kind of hold each other, and Debbie comforts Mark about his murder of Angstrom Levy. He sits on the roof, and Cecil is very like, any day you kill a bad guy is a good day, which is a very black and white attitude for Cecil, who last season with, let's say, Damien Darkblood was very not black and white. He was very shades of gray with, yeah, we know Omni Man did it, but we got to keep him alive and stop poking into this Darkblood. Darkblood really got the wrong end of the shaft there, but and Mark later is sitting on the roof. Debbie goes in to say goodnight and finds him sitting on the roof, just moping and brooding, and breaks down and says, "I'm going to quit college. I need to take care of myself. I need to fix myself," which is the absolute right move. But at the same time, I don't think he's going to go about it the right way. He needs outside help to talk to him or someone to help him. But he's just going to try to push harder and be better on his own. Kind of like Robot, just try to self-help. I think he needs some outside help. So let's see how that works out. If he goes to someone or not. Who does he have to go to? Cecil is his only option. And then I believe the last thing we have to talk about is after that scene, Mark meets Eve sitting on that bridge above the Guardians' hidden secret headquarters. And they sit there, they kind of talk. She's like, "Are you okay? Do you want to talk about it?" He says he doesn't want to talk about it. They kind of touch fingers. He kind of puts his hand on her hand, but pulls back a little bit and said, "I have something to tell you." And she says, "What?" And he says, "Nothing." And that'll be a storyline, I assume, in the next season, whenever that may be. But just so you know, in the comic books, similar storyline. He gets sent to that world. He kills Angstrom. The old Guardians come and save him. Older Eve tells him that she loved him to talk to younger her. And at a certain point, he does tell her that he met her 20 years later and that she told him that she's in love with him and that he should go back and tell her whether or not he's in love with her. Which is the craziest thing. Like, how can you say that? It's the absolutely wrong thing to do. And she did run off. And furious after that, because how do you have any power in a relationship at that point when you already know that your older self told you all of your secrets to that person that you were in love with. But at least for now, he's playing it cooler and he hasn't said anything yet. So we'll see where that goes. So yeah, this was an incredible season, just full of really cool stuff. Lots of, and again, another season ending with just blood and gore. And last season it was the train in Chicago. This season it's smaller and bigger all at the same time. It's one man, Angstrom Levy, but then we see all the Marks killing people around the multiverse, and just the amount of blood that came out of Angstrom's. Oh my god! And I think I'm excited for where next season is going to go. I think we can kind of see where it's going. We've got Alan and Nolan plotting on the space prison ship. We've got that Viltrumite woman that came down to talk to Mark, telling him that he's got to change his mind, come to, and say he'll take over the Earth for the Viltrumites. So that's going to come to a head at some point. They're not just going to forget about that. We have the whole Telestria, the coalition up there with Thaddeus or Thetis, who is a Viltrumite, another fallen Viltrumite, gathering forces. We have Mark and Eve. Eve, we know that Eve is in love with Mark. We have Kate is still alive. We have Immortal taking a leave of absence from the Guardians. Now that he knows Kate is alive, maybe he'll come back. We have Donald, who's now a robot and knows he has been one for many, many years, and they kept erasing his memories. We have the Mummy. The Mummy is still there. We'll find out what's happening with the Mummy. I'm still got my fingers crossed that Damien Darkblood's coming back, but it's not looking good for me, folks. It's not looking good for me. And we have a little while to go. So we have some more. We have some thoughts between Sean and I. We have some thoughts on some other videos we're gonna put out on Invincible and on some other topics. So you'll see those coming up in the coming weeks. Make sure you go down in the comments and say hi to us. We'll talk back. We'll say we'd love to have a conversation down there with you. You can see some links down there we have to buy a shirt, buy a pin. We got some videos all around here in the corners if you want to click on those guys. I hate to say it, it sounds hokey, but please like the video, please subscribe to the channel, because then we get to do more of these and maybe give Sean some opportunities to come and shoot with me. The scheduling wouldn't be as hard, but you know, things happen, and sometimes you just gotta talk by yourself into a camera while your friend is busy. So, until next time, I'm Andrew. See you next time, Sean. See you later, YouTube. Have a good night.